So I hope that I have the window open, so there's probably a lot of sound, and I hope that my streaming will not get interrupted. I notice when I do listen back to some of my upload live streams that there's dropouts, and hopefully when I finally get to a concept, because I take so long to get to a concept. Um, that during the expression of the concept that it doesn't drop out. So, and if there's any questions about what I was getting at, I could probably clarify it in the comments. And, uh, you know, as I go on, my own mental clarity on what has pretty much happened to me in my life gets somewhat clearer and clearer. So, for the people that return and want to know what's going on, there were a couple of things that happened that fostered the actual physical um, separation of me and my spouse, not legally, just physically. And what facilitated that was probably where I'm at mentally, and in the skills that I've learned through reading and watching about cluster B, um, predominantly narcissism, because that's what's predominantly out there. So I will try to refer to this as cluster B, because even though my spouse was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder at the hospital, because of an incident that he, by his own choices. So he does have a diagnosis. This is not just speculation. This is 25 years of effort of trying to understand what's going on, and kind of being, at my age and at his age, having been sidelined, because this is something that should have been picked up on years ago, even though it doesn't seem until, somewhat recently that the modalities for treatment have really accelerated to where they are now. So, to foster this separation without the threat of suicidality and self harm, self harm has continued, but not without, like, to actually get my spouse to remove himself and feel okay with removing himself from where we live. um there was a couple of things that happened. I already went through that. I had gone through a withdrawal from my partner, even while still living with him. The withdrawal was a withdrawal. I withdrew from myself, as I explained in the last video. With that withdrawal, I have my notes here because there's a lot of concepts I want to get to. But with that withdrawal, there was first, really, really feeling that I was alone in the relationship, and just knowing that this feeling of aloneness that did not exist when I was single, and I had to go back to my 20s to think about what it felt like to live on my own, and the feeling of solitude, and how with the feeling of solitude there was a peace. So the fact that I didn't have peace or understanding in my relationship for so many years, and I was always grappling to achieve that peace and understanding with my spouse, and never being able to accomplish that sustainably and nurturing. There was no growth for 25 years. I would refer to him as a blank slate. Like, every day was like nothing was, no concepts of emotionality and accountability for behaviors and choices was grown from, like, the mistakes that were made were not improved to the point, were not remedied to the point where the mistake wouldn't happen again. So, mistake or grievance that I had, he would be able to continue on and present the same grievance, and without having taken into consideration what I was concerned about. um, as a side note, and this is all I'm going to say, I just went through COVID. So, and I'll just say that being in a relationship as the one I've been in was one where your health will be compromised. As I said in other videos, I'm also a cancer survivor. I went through cancer during my relationship, so your health will be compromised. So that's not to blame, but it's to express what this endurance event is like. The endurance event of psychological warfare, of one person, me, the codependent. Literally, I learned I was trauma bonded. Um, what they, now I lost my train of thought, but I think you get what I'm saying. So to to explain just a little further, the feeling of the feeling of me needing that he's not gonna fucking die on my clock, on my watch, and yet there needs to be this healthy separation, as some people call it, a conscious uncoupling. I mean, it's like so ridiculous, but if I were to kind of explain it in that way, so the feeling of feeling alone within a relationship, yet having a substantial uh, foundation within myself, knowing that I know what alone feels like alone, and I know what solitude feels like, and the difference between them, and also loneliness. So I would say like the aloneness was like a loneliness for what I didn't have with him, what I was striving for. So once I was able to kind of verbalize this very calmly and logically, because the trauma bond has a lot of drama in it. And as you could see from other people's videos, there's a lot of reasons for the drama, uh, because of narcissistic abuse, cluster B abuse. I would say um, my spouse, though he was diagnosed with BBT, there are elements of narcissism in there. There's depression in there. There's ADHD in there. There's a lot of things that wax and wane as uh, each day, each hour, each minute progresses, with the interaction. If there is interaction, if he's calling me on the phone and telling me about an interaction elsewhere with somebody else, is very interpersonal, as you know from DBT. So as the moods fluctuate, you'll see elements of, like, what they say, the grandiosity, the overt, the covert, the this, the that. It's all there. So um, I would say there's three things: the feeling of feeling alone and expressing that to him. Um, a lot of drama involved with the expression, because then I'm questioned about my aloneness, and like made to feel that I'm blaming him for my aloneness. And I'll be like, he can say things like, I can't believe you're telling me this, or so you feel alone. It's an attacky kind of response with no sense of reflection. So with that, I had to own my own toxicity. And when I was expressing that to him, like, this is a toxic relationship. Whenever I open my mouth, he goes to slice up his arm. That that is something that for years I thought he was punishing me. So when I realized that he wasn't punishing me, though the relationship is very punishing, um, uh, to witness that, to experience that on a daily basis for expressing my wants and needs and concerns. Um, I'm I'm part of that toxicity, and and I had to own that I was toxic, that I'm actually influencing him in a very toxic way, and I don't want that for him. I'm tired of hurting him. Now, of course, I'd want him to realize how much he's hurting me, but the empath, the codependent, the whatever, the meanness of who I am within that realm, which, as I said in other videos, uh, the narcissist and codependent empath whatever, has to kind of be treated the same, but one has an edge over, one has like a little bit more awareness, and I would be the one that has more awareness because I'm acknowledging and concerned about where we are spiritually on a daily basis, whereas he doesn't come to me with those concerns. He's kind of rigid in his methods of going about life, very chore oriented, very external oriented. Are you okay? Do you want water? Do you want this? Very, very doting in that way. Yet when it comes to having a deep conversation that ignites a rage, there's a limit. So that he can, only a limit that he could endure. So before it triggers anger, rage, and then he can't take it anymore, and then he starts slicing up his arm or punching himself in the eye. These are things that nobody should have to endure or witness. It's a form of domestic violence without me personally being physically damaged, but the internalization of this is damaging to me because my immune system is suppressed. I'm not getting my needs met. So I had to own my own toxicity, the feeling and let him know that this is not healthy, and being with me is not healthy, and that he needs a place of his own to sort this out, to actually be able to adjust oneself. There was I think when I read Games People Play by Eric Byrne, there is a suggestion, and well, it's more than a suggestion, but there is a concept in there that where the psychologists and psychiatrists are not supposed to tamper too much with the patient, because sometimes things can work themselves out on their own. So in some way, I felt that this was happening for me, uh, and will happen at a quicker rate for me with the separation, with being able to just have a peace within myself while I'm alone, going about my chores and my business alone. Very important. So, um, okay, so I did this concept, I did that concept, I did this concept. Just to circle back, he'd never been independent. So, um, he went from living in his, sociopathic parenting basement of a place or apartment, right into the military, which is not completely independent, is not considered complete independence, because you have housing and you have food and you have a paycheck. Okay, that's not like being, independent, like having to pay bills on time on your own. It's like there's no bills to pay in the military. Okay, and then straight into, right after the military, right back into his parents' house. That was rented, a rented house. They've never owned a thing in that regard, and then into moved in with me. Okay, so he's never been independent, and that was like a recurring theme that he'd always bring this up, like um, that he doesn't have his independence. So that's the gift I gave him the day I told him I have to let you go. He woke up that morning and looked at me, I call it blank slate, smiling at me, just happy to be in my presence, and as if, I call it as if there's no history about us. So I had to tell him I have to let him go. So then they say that, the truth will set you free. If you love someone, set them free when it's dysfunctional. Okay. when it is toxic, and to understand the levels of toxicity. There's, I'm really deep into the toxicity. There's more minor levels of toxicity where you need to let somebody free and give them their independence. He would never leave me. He said he was not strong enough to leave me, and he would be okay continuing in the way that he continues. He even tells me now, because I talk to him every day, that he didn't want us to break up. It's almost like it's he had an issue, a problem with understanding the concept of you can't have your cake and eat it too. This is like, he wants to slice up his arm and punch himself in the eye, give himself black eyes, put forks in his head and do all kinds of crazy things and have me. Well, okay, you had that for 25 years. Well, the slicing up of the arm and the punching in the eye, this all increased, and they say it will. They say it will increase when connection is unstable. Okay, let's see. They say that people that have BPD, it'll maybe naturally or normally go down as they reach their 40s and 50s. However, if rage and anger uh, um, increases, that likelihood of those symptoms decreasing on their own will not diminish. So that comes in the part of the enabler. The reason why his anger and rage was continuing because I'm having him face the demands that I have to get my needs met in a regular partnership, which would seem like a regular neurotypical partnership, that I'm not getting. Plus, I'm demanding. Well, the other concept is the external idea is that he has no interior, or not enough of an interior. I shouldn't say that somebody has no interior. They don't have enough enough wiles to know what it is inside them, that if they did work on, why does this keep saying your connection isn't, please wait. I just hope that now that I'm into the concept, what is the beneficial, strong area within oneself to then build on? That it's all a disorder. It's all disorganized. It's um, the result of the maladaptive coping mechanism. Some people call BPD an adaptation. Okay, so by allowing him to feel like you need to be independent, that concept resonated and made sense with him. So basically, it came to the point where I had to say, you can't sleep here anymore. And he's like, well, you won't allow me to get a storage space. I said, well, because the two other times within these 25 years that I asked him that, I can't take it anymore, that he has to leave, he would get a storage space and then come back and sleep in the same bed with me, or in another bed in the same apartment. So that's the twisted logic of the manipulation. So I went away and came back. I said, I'll compromise. You can get a storage space, and you cannot sleep here anymore. So he then jumped on it, because I had given him a month and a half to move, and I was okay with the gradual process, to allow it to be an unfolding instead of like everything move in one truck in one day. I mean, I love this person immensely as a human, despite his shortcomings, and I know he loves me with his limitations and despite his shortcomings. So when you have this person's your family member. However, a spouse is not really a family member. When I read Randy Krieger's book, the caring for your borderline, a family member is very different than a spouse. They should not be put together, because a spouse is required to meet romantic, sensual, sexual needs, whereas a child, or a parent, or an extended grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a friend is not required to do that. So it shouldn't be put together in the same group, because that's where my problem was. I started considering my husband as my family, which is the normal thing to do in a normal relationship. But when that family member is then, toxic and imploding and self-destructive, then there has to be the separation. So I just wanted to make that point. So me being me, a lot of these videos I watch, they say the enabler, the narcissistic supply, they do this, they tell people, like, they make excuses for people. I've never done that. What it comes down to for me is the idea that just the mere presence of being together with somebody is enough of an enablement. That's it. Bottom line, just being in the vicinity, co-creating a roof over one another's head, working partnership, on a daily basis, that is enough of an enablement. Never mind all the things that they talk about. That's why they say remove yourself and go no contact. Now, I've decided not to go no contact because of the reasons I just mentioned before. However, I made a big step for myself, okay? And that step is a healthy step for both of us. So I just wanted to get to that area. I think I'll save that for this time, and I'll save that with it. But the last concept I wanted to, I guess, introduce, because I don't even have my mind really understanding of this. However, I do have an issue when I read this information and listen to these videos, and I listen to, like I said in the other videos, all kinds of works of all kinds of doctors and all kinds of people, non-doctors, just the concept of mirroring. The concept of mirroring is a very elusive concept when it comes to actually applying that concept to cluster B. Now, with my brief experience with imago relationship advice, mirroring is making sure you understand what the other person said and repeating back. There's also infant parent mirroring that happens for when the infant is growing. Now, I believe the borderline, when they say it's pretty much arrested development in the under the very early stage, the Erickson's autonomy versus shame, and perhaps even before that, trust versus mistrust. Because in my adult relationship with my spouse, I have trust versus mistrust issues. So that's very early, 0 to 2 years old. Autonomy versus shame, 0 to 2 years old, pretty much. 0 to 1 is, I think, trust versus mistrust. Autonomy versus shame, 1 to 2. Okay, so this is very early, and within that is also the object relations. So that's a very early stage of arrested development. So when this mirroring happens at that early stage, I just hope, now it says it's cleared up. I hope now it's unstable again. Whatever, I'm going to have to watch this back. And do you even hear me this whole time? Nobody's talking to me. I don't even see the microphone going. God, am I going to have to do this all over again? Whatever, I'll just finish up. The mirroring is one where, no, it's there. I can see my cough there, so hopefully you could hear me well enough. The green little dot is registering on the microphone. The only way I can begin to wrap my head around this concept in how mirroring in a relationship, in a dysfunctional relationship, when you know it's dysfunctional, is that it's not mirroring, it's copycat. So this is an area that I believe needs further explanation by the doctors that delve into the concepts of mirroring. All I can say is that the mirroring, in my experience, is not a mirroring of a true mirroring of me. It's a copycat. It's copying what I'm doing, and that mirror is I'm looking at myself, because that person then becomes me and is experiencing their own personal experiences through me, as me, not their own independent experience sharing with me, which goes back to the concept of love is within the self. And you don't find somebody to love. You don't find love. You find someone to share love with, the love you have within you with a person. So if there is um, a what was I calling it? Not a deficient state of somebody's own self-love, then they don't have enough for even themselves. They cannot possibly share more than what they have with themselves with somebody else. So the illusion, which is a delusion, the empath, the codependent, the trauma is bonded person is deluded by the illusion of this person imitating, copying what the ideas of love is. But when it gets down to it, why are you holding my hand? It feels like it's sweaty. What's the purpose of holding my hand? And we're holding hands, but I don't feel the love. It's not progressing. There's a waiting for the initiation of the other person, of the neurotypical person, of the non-cluster B, to initiate most of the intimacy. So keep that in mind, that when you delve into the concepts of mirroring, and how when you're dealing with a cluster B, it's not mirroring in the psychological sense that is spoken about and written about. It is copying, it's imitation. I've even read on Quora that cluster Bs are excellent imitators. They could memorize. I remember learning about a concept of being echolalic. That's something else to look up. That's something that children learn early on. Again, all this is arrested development and early. It's adult children, like Pete Gerlach says, grown wounded children. So that's that for today. I'm doing better being alone. I'm still in contact with my spouse every day. I'm going to call him now, probably. He's a brilliant individual that we've worked so hard on certain artistic projects together that have not yet come to fruition, that in a sense need to come to fruition. So I'm not completely discontinuing that, but I have done the good thing for me, at least. The idea where they say you have to just care about yourself after a while, that did happen to me during the withdrawal. I just cared about myself instead of always caring, whatever. You get it. And then that also leads to the care, the true, honest care of another person. So it's a very sad state of affairs. Very, very sad state of affairs. There's a lot of emotions that go along with this, and the emotions of a lost life and having been deprived, neglected, and knowing that there is deprivation and neglect. The other person, they're not going to know. They only know what they know, which is limited, and they survive in that mode. And that's what's sad, because that there's more to be had, and they don't. which can lead to another concept that I'll get to another time of the religious concepts of reincarnation and being left behind, which are kind of like the same thing. So think on that. I'll see you later.